Something a little different today. Instead of focusing on our horse's health, which we tend to do as horse owners, we're going to focus on us, which is a really important thing that as horse owners we don't do very much. Our guest today is Andrea Parker, who is an accredited practicing dietitian with 10 years experience. She's also a lifelong equestrian who incorporates intuitive eating and sports nutrition to help fuel riders. Now, she also has an amazingly supportive Facebook page called The Equestrian Athlete, and she's here today to talk about nutrition and how it can help support healthy aging and your riding. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Andrea Parker. My business is The Equestrian Athlete, and I am an accredited practicing dietitian, provisional sports dietitian, and certified intuitive eating counselor. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about an introduction to fueling your ride. As you mentioned, I think as riders, we spend a lot of time considering our horse's needs and not so much time considering our own needs, which, doesn't necessarily set us up for success because we are 50% of the partnership, if not more, because we do bear the burden of making all of the decisions for both our horses and ourselves.
And I think about how many professionals my horse is a client of compared to how many I have. And I'm lucky if I even go to the GP unless I'm dying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that was one of the reasons that I started my business, is I think that there's a real need for that conversation to change. And I think that that's starting to shift a little bit in terms of the benefits that can have for athletic performance. But even if you just think about, we're human beings, we deserve to take care of ourselves. Like, that's just something we inherently deserve. We don't have to be, trying to go to the Olympics to deserve that.
And I think as women also, usually they put themselves last on the list.
100%. 100%. So it's like a quadruple whammy at least. So in today's chat, I thought I would just give a little bit of background to who I am and the way that I work, because the way that I work is a little bit different than how people typically think of dietitians working. I wanted to talk about why nutrition is important for riders and 3 of the factors that I see that really contribute to energy slumps or fatigue, again, for riders and horse people. And then I wanted to touch a little bit on nutrition and menopause. So, as you already mentioned, I am a lifelong equestrian. I started riding when I was 9, and over the years I've done a bunch of different disciplines, but dressage is really where my true love lies. Although I think next year I'm pretty keen to give working equitation a go.
It does look quite interesting.
It looks like so much fun. When I was in my last couple of years of high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And my mum said to me, well, you can do anything you want, except you can't work with horses and you can't become a nurse. Mum was a nurse and was not keen on the shift work. Yep. Didn't want that for me. And so I was quite lucky, really, that I fell into dietetics and have found something that I really love. And as we've already mentioned, recently I kind of saw the need for riders to be taking care of themselves, horse people to be taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
So that's where my business was born from. I fundamentally love food. There are a few exceptions to that rule. I'm not a huge fan of fruit, and cucumbers are an absolute no-go for me. And so that, I guess, that love of food kind of is something that I hope to help my clients develop. I see a lot of people really struggle with their relationship with food, and I think that food is something that should be enjoyed and it shouldn't be a source of stress in your life. And because of that, within my work, I use a non-diet approach, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in the next slide.
And that's very important too, with the non-traditional diet base. My background is very European, and so food is love, basically. You share food with the people that you love, and to restrict it sort of goes against the grain a bit. And I love cake, my afternoon cake with a tea or coffee.
Absolutely. And, it's really sad that food has been demonized, that we kind of lose that connection to culture and family. And and just, yeah, that joy in food and eating gets lost and gets demonized.
And it's also, I have a young daughter, and being careful around terminology. We try not to say that there's bad food. There's bad food. You have food that you only eat sometimes, but you shouldn't feel bad if you eat it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those sorts of mindset shifts are things that I work on a lot with my clients. And even I work full time in mental health, and everyone that I work with knows that if they say bad foods, I'll be like, what's a bad food? It's a food that's going off or is undercooked or that you're actually allergic to. The rest are just foods.
Yeah.
So I am based in South Brisbane, but because my services are telehealth, I'm able to work with people all across Australia.
Awesome.
Which is really nice. So as you mentioned, the framework that I work with is called intuitive eating, and really what that has is at its core is self-care and improving that relationship with food and your body. And I guess some people, when they kind of hear improving your relationship with your body, might feel a little bit wary, and that idea of loving your body might pop into the frame. It's not about loving your body necessarily. It's really about respecting your body. And I think it's quite hard to actually take care of something well if you hate it or you don't respect it. And so that's another one of those mindset shifts that I work towards with my clients. And within intuitive eating, what we're really looking to do is to integrate physical sensations, so things like hunger and fullness and satisfaction, and even an awareness of what's happening with your energy levels and your fatigue and all of those sorts of things. We also want to integrate emotion, so we should be able to enjoy food, but we also want to be able to meet our emotional needs in ways that don't involve food. That's just an important part of being a human. And we also want to integrate logic into it. So that's where that knowledge of nutrition, the types of foods that make us feel good, that give us long-lasting energy, the types of foods that are going to be helpful before we ride versus in the middle of the day to give us that energy to get through, an afternoon of meetings or whatever it is that we've got on our plate.
Yeah.
And I guess really knowing that fundamentally one food or eating experience isn't going to make or break our health. So within intuitive eating, we're kind of tying all of those things in together. And I guess where this really differs from a diet or a restrictive way of eating is that within diets, we're following this external set of rules, and that really disconnects us from our body and from our needs. And it doesn't set us up for success in the long run. So it can result in some really wonky patterns within our eating.
Be good, be good, be good, be good. Binge, binge, binge. Be good, be good, be good.
Exactly right. Yeah, that binge restrict cycle really is a self-perpetuating or an ongoing loop that feeds into itself. Some of the other things that we might see is, say it's the weekend and you're like, all right, on Monday, I'm going to be good. The diet starts on Monday, or, it might not even be a strict diet as such. You might just be like, okay, on Monday, no more chocolate, or I'm going to just have a couple of pieces of chocolate. But because of that,
like on Monday, nothing but chocolate.
Exactly. And we kind of can get this Last Supper effect over the weekend where we're like, well, I know on Monday I'm not going to be able to have any, so I'm going to get it all in now.
No, I like to call that clearing out the fridge of those foods. So, because otherwise I have to throw them away.
Yes. Yeah. So there's kind of those two sides of that. And we know with humans that we tend to want things that we can't have. So when we set up a food as being off limits, it tends to make us think about it more. It's kind of like the
taboo.
You don't think of the elephant in the room or the bear in the room. As soon as you kind of have that thought in your mind, that's what you focus on. So really we're trying to get rid of those rules and listen to our body to set us up to feel good physically and mentally. And really, I guess one of the other goals is that we want to spend less time thinking and worrying about food and eating, because while it is an incredible part of life, it shouldn't control our life.
Yep.
So, moving along, how does nutrition support us as riders? This is a topic that I absolutely love talking about. And I think when I first kind of came to sports nutrition, I was like, well, it's about performance. You know, if our energy levels aren't good, if our concentration's not there, we can't react, we're experiencing digestive symptoms like an upset stomach. Those things, yes, they do impact on performance, but particularly our concentration and reactions. That's also about safety. So we've probably all been in a situation where we've either been sitting on a horse or walking a horse along. 1 second they're next to you walking along really politely, and the next second you feel like you're flying a kite.
Yep.
And I think we can all agree that in those situations we need to be able to, you know, be concentrating on what's happening with our horse, with us, the environment around us, and we need to be able to react pretty quickly in order to keep ourselves, our horse, and anyone who's nearby safe. The other thing that we know is that when our nutrition is out of whack, that can also increase our injury risk. You know, that's more so from that exercise perspective.
Okay.
And then, of course, nutrition plays a really important role in terms of maintaining our strength and supporting health and aging. So it's quite, we can think of it purely in that performance sense, but it's quite holistic, I guess, in terms of the impacts that nutrition can have on us. So kind of, I guess, moving on from that, or the next step that I like to think of from that is preventing those energy slumps or the fatigue. I think that's probably one of the most common things I see in, actually, I was going to say riders, but probably just in clients across the board, is really suffering from low energy levels. And of course, there's a number of different things that can contribute to that. Not getting enough sleep being one of them, having too many things on our plate. We can, as riders, again, we can all kind of relate to those things where there's so many balls that we're juggling in the air. But we know as well that nutrition can have a really big impact on those things. So I guess the three kind of things that I see are people not eating enough, restricting carbohydrates, or becoming dehydrated. So let's delve into each of those things a little bit more. So we know that if we're not getting enough energy in overall, then our energy levels are going to suffer. It's kind of the same thing as if you tried to get in your car and drive it without having any fuel in the tank. You're not going to go very far. I guess in terms of figuring out whether or not you're getting enough nutrition, that can be something that can be a little bit tricky to tell, particularly if you, I guess someone who is not doing an excessive amount of exercise, that's where tuning into your hunger and fullness really comes into play. But if you're someone who is on their feet a lot for work, or you're spending a lot of time in the saddle, then that can really blunt those hunger cues.
Yep.
But there are a couple of red flags to look out for. So for women, having a missing or an irregular period is a sign that you're potentially not getting enough nutrition. Within the research, they also talk about, for men, having a reduced libido. Fatigue obviously is one of them. Becoming unwell more often, or taking a really long time to recover. Mm-hmm. So those are all some signs that you might not be getting enough nutrition.
Okay.
And a couple of tips in terms of getting enough nutrition in, making sure that you're eating regularly during the day and including carbohydrates with your meals and before exercise. So limiting carbohydrates is something, again, that I see really commonly. Unfortunately, they've got a really bad rap in our culture at the moment. Mm-hmm. And I think that people don't necessarily understand that carbohydrates are really important for your brain to function well. That's actually our brain's preferred fuel source. And then when we're up and moving or exercising, our muscles also use that carbohydrate as a fuel source. Yes, they use other fuel sources, but carbohydrates are a really important one.
Is it
And I
because
think a lot of
is it
sorry.
because carbohydrates have gotten a bad rap because it's very easy to get ultra processed carbohydrates?
Look, there's a bunch of different reasons as to why carbohydrates have been kind of demonized, but I think they're just generally misunderstood. And even sometimes those more processed carbohydrates can actually be a really good option
Okay.
before exercise or during exercise, because we don't want to be eating something that's quite high in fiber really close to exercise. If you're going to go for a run or you're going to be doing a lesson where you're doing lots of sitting trot, having something sitting in your stomach is going to make you feel quite uncomfortable. Yeah. So those processed carbohydrates can actually play an important role in fueling athletes.
So I shouldn't feel guilty if I grab like a Carmen's muesli bar, for example, as a pre-ride snack.
Absolutely not. So those are kind of a higher fiber snack option. But if in terms of toleration of food around exercise, everyone's really different. So if that's sitting okay in your stomach, go for it.
Cool.
Yeah, those are actually one of my favorite muesli bars. They're so good.
The blueberry ones are good.
Oh, I haven't had the blueberry ones.
I have to make sure I get them before the kids do.
One of the other things is that people are often quite surprised that dairy is a source of carbohydrate. Yeah. And then, of course, things like our fun food. I don't call them bad foods or junk food. I call them fun foods. Things like lollies.
I did have a giggle when I saw that down the bottom, like fun foods.
Yeah, I think, again, it's just kind of being mindful of the impact that language can have on the way that we relate to food. And if we think of things as being bad, we're kind of implying it has this moral value. Yes. And it's just a food.
It's just food.
Yeah. So that's a little bit on fueling. So getting enough nutrition in and carbohydrates. Moving on to dehydration. So I guess just going back a step, remembering that sweating is the way that our bodies maintain our temperature. So it helps us to cool down. And when we sweat, we lose fluid. Fluid's really important in terms of kind of maintaining all of our body's different functions. And we know that dehydration as little as 2%. So if you think about someone who's about 70 kilos, 2% would be 1.4 kilos or 1.4 liters of sweat. We can start to see impacts of that level of dehydration. So things like exercise feeling harder, again, that fatigue coming in, impaired reactions and concentration, reduced endurance and strength, and we can also start to see some digestive symptoms coming in. And the other thing is that it increases our injury risk again. So if you kind of think about the amount of clothing and layers that we wear when we're riding, I reckon on some days in summer, I've like pulled off my top boots and there's been, it feels like there's just a huge amount of sweat just in the boots. So
and this also comes back to what we talked at the beginning. We worry about our horses' hydration in the hotter months, yep. The electrolytes, are they drinking enough, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And yet, I personally don't turn around and I will have a water bottle, but I only literally drink when I feel thirsty.
Yeah.
I'm not there going, well, did I drink enough today? Because, I've been out for 8 hours now doing stuff. It's just like I've had a big day and that's why I'm tired and my muscles are achy.
Yeah. And I know for myself, even I have to be really careful on competition days, because otherwise I'll get to the end of the day and I'll be like, oh, I've only weed once and I've got a headache and I'm feeling really exhausted. I wonder why.
I don't think I've ever come, and it's been a while since I've competed, but back in the day, I can't think of any competitions that I ever finished at the end of it and didn't have a headache. And so I competed in Queensland, Cairns and Brisbane and stuff. And it was just par for course that I would have huge headache by the end of the day and muscles aching.
So that it's not a good way to be feeling. But also then our work isn't over once we've finished riding. Like we generally have to drive home, do the stables, feed the horses, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, definitely paying attention to hydration is a really important one. And it's something in terms of the amount of fluid that we need, it's kind of hard to give specific guidelines because it changes quite a bit in terms of someone's activity level or how intensely they're exercising, their body size, and even things like the environmental conditions. So the amount of fluid that you would need if you were competing up in Cairns right now versus Perth are going to be hugely different because you don't have that same level of humidity in Perth, even though both are kind of warm climates.
It's a different heat.
It's a very different heat. Yeah. So that's something that I work on a lot with my one-on-one clients, is kind of improving that hydration and thinking about how we can make it easier to stay hydrated. All right. Last but not least, as I said, I wanted to touch a little bit on nutrition and menopause. So there's some key considerations in terms of supporting that healthy aging through menopause because of those hormonal changes that can occur. So when we think about things like our bones, we know that the hormonal changes that do occur during menopause can increase the rate at which we're losing bone mineral density, which can increase your risk of osteoporosis. When we're working around horses and there's the potential for falling, we do really want to make sure that we're keeping our bones nice and strong and healthy. And nutrition can play a really important role in terms of preserving bone mineral density. There's also some considerations around exercise, which I won't talk about because that's outside of my scope of practice as a dietitian. But in terms of nutrition, some things that we should think about are trying to get enough calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K, magnesium, and also protein. So there's quite a few different nutrients that are important in terms of maintaining our bone health. And I've given you that resource, which kind of goes into a little bit more specific and talks about some of the sources of those different foods. And of course, vitamin D we can get from food, but we also get from the sun.
Which most horse people should be fine with.
Most horse people should be fine with it. But the interesting thing is that as soon as we put sunscreen on, that changes our ability to absorb and, I guess, absorb the vitamin D. And so there's been some interesting stuff coming out around the prevalence of vitamin D deficiency in Australia because we are so sun safety conscious, which we absolutely need to be. If anyone is concerned about their vitamin D levels, your doctor can really easily check those through a blood test.
Awesome.
So the next thing is maintaining our muscle mass. So this is something that's important, not just, again, from that performance perspective, but also losing muscle mass is associated with increased illness and death as well, so mortality. And we know that as we get older, it's harder for our body to hold on to muscle, but also the hormonal changes during menopause seem to contribute to muscle mass loss. So again, nutrition plays an important role, and exercise in maintaining our muscle mass. So protein is kind of one of the nutrients that we really think about in terms of getting enough of that and having it spread out across the day can help to maintain our muscle mass. There's also some considerations around heart health. Again, because of those hormonal changes, the heart disease risk increases, and nutrition can support heart health. I'm not going to go into that today.
The whole topic by itself?
Yeah, it's quite a big one. And then last but not least, in terms of symptom management, there is some evidence that phytoestrogens, so we find phytoestrogens in things like soy foods and also flaxseed, that those foods might support reducing some of those symptoms like hot flushes that we see in perimenopause and postmenopause. And having those at a moderate level appears to be quite safe. Like, I wouldn't recommend supplementing that without kind of really looking at exactly what someone's doing and what their risk profile is. Yeah. All right. That was all I had prepared. Did you have any questions?
Look, you've covered a lot of it. I think you've highlighted, I mean, personally for me, I think my big thing is probably around dehydration.
Yeah.
Which is a very common sense one, but until someone points out, because I do drink water, I'm probably just not drinking enough.
Yeah.
The other one I would have is superfoods, just very quickly, because I'm conscious of the time. Yeah. A lot of our members, they are coming back from ill health, be it cancer, stroke, heart attack. And I made the comment that when I finished my last treatment, I thought I was better. It just meant I wasn't sick anymore. And it took me 12 months to realize that I had to put a conscious effort into becoming better. So nutrition obviously plays a big part in that. Would there be something that would be your go-to food that you would consider a superfood to help, in that stage?
I used to joke that the best superfood is a balanced diet. I guess, yeah, the superfoods have benefits, but there's not one that I would sort of recommend as like a go-to. And I think it doesn't kind of, having a superfood or multiple superfoods certainly doesn't negate the need for that overall
Good
balance.
nutrition.
Yeah, and I guess sometimes some of those things can be really expensive.
Yeah.
And there are some questions in my mind around whether the cost outweighs the benefit.
And sometimes it's just good marketing.
Sometimes it is very good marketing. Food companies are exceptional at marketing.
All big businesses.
Yeah, it just makes things really confusing for people. And I think also the way that media generally kind of reports information around nutrition is not helpful.
Yes, well, media in general.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that today, Andrea. It's a very good starting point, as I said, on just highlighting some of the areas that maybe we're letting ourselves down. Now, I did mention you have a great Facebook page that's very supportive, and I will put the comment in the credits of this and also in the comments when we do it. But thank you very much. I always say at the end of these, I'm always processing because I'm still thinking back to some of the stuff that's been said. But thank you very much for that, Andrea.
Yeah, no worries at all. And if yourself or anyone watching this has any questions that kind of pop up, I've kind of put my contact details throughout the presentation. So feel free to shoot me a message on Instagram or email me. Some of the things if it's about your individual needs, I can't always necessarily answer those without going through a full consult. But if it's general, I'm happy to kind of have those conversations with people or point you in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that, Andrea.
Thank you.